how an FDA EUA changed everything I knew about medtech. So a little bit about me. I have a background in biomedical engineering. I went to school with a dream of someday inventing medical devices and changing the world. I worked in medical device industry for 15 years, and some of you can relate who are still in the corporate world, is that you get jaded after a while. You face so many limitations. You always dealing with red tapes, and after a while, just like a horse that where the leash is just sitting on a piece of wood, and the horse wouldn't walk away. You become the same way. You limit yourself, and you don't think that your dreams that you had when you were younger are possible. And that's where I was after 15 years of being in the industry. I was starting to lose my hopes of someday being involved in medical device innovation. But here I am, part of a team. We have a device that's just got EUA approval, and my dream is actually turning to reality. And that's what leads me to my next slide, which is the founders. And truly, the reason I'm in this position and my dreams are being realized is that it was the team and the group of people that I was lucky enough to work with. That's the reason why we're here. Our founders, we have Dr. Alex Fireman, who's on the call, Dr. Cackley, who couldn't make it. And then on the left, we have one of our inventors, Dr. Farid Rahman, who's a chair of electrical engineering at Sonoma State University. And then myself. So you have two engineers on the right, and then you have two doctors on the left. Two engineers who are super pessimistic, always thinking about what could go wrong. But you always had the doctors who kept yelling at us and telling us, you know what? I don't care about what you think. I need this solution. If you can make it for me, I'm going to go do it myself. So that has been the most significant factor in our success so far. So I wanted to go over that, but now I'm going to jump in on how did we get to our device. So one day, a couple of years ago, I'm sitting at WeWork, and Dr. Fatima calls me. He's like, "Where are you?" I'm at WeWork. So he shows up. He puts an incentive spirometer in front of me, and I have one here. And the last time I had used one of these was with my father, who passed away the year before. He was bedbound for quite some time. So the doctor had prescribed him one of these, and I was using it with him. So to me, it kind of felt like fate. So I went through with it. So that night, we spent 3 hours scratching and on whiteboards and calling respiratory therapists to know how they use the incentive spirometer, what are the measurements they take, what is their workflow. And initially, our focus was pneumonia. As you guys know, hospital-acquired pneumonia is the leading hospital-acquired infection. It costs the U.S. healthcare about $10 billion in related costs, mainly rehospitalization. And there was research that shows better compliance of the incentive spirometer actually reduces hospital-acquired pneumonia. So from there, we had a sketch on a piece of paper, and then fast forward, we had the first working unit. And from there, after a couple of years of work, we have our minimum viable product. As you can see, this is a patient on bed using the incentive spirometer. The way an incentive spirometer works is that the doctor sets your max tidal volume that you're supposed to reach, and the patient is supposed to use this every day or maybe every hour for a certain number of time, and they're supposed to hit that goal. But unfortunately, right now, there's no way to know if the patient hit their goal or not. So what happens is that the nurse comes in, or the respiratory therapist asks the patient, Mrs. Johnson, how many times did you use it? Oh, I did use it this many times. Did you hit your goal? Oh, yes. But there's no way for us to confirm if that happens or not. So the NC basically attaches to the bottom of an existing set of spirometer. And what it does is that it measures the tidal volume, and it has a screen in the bottom that will give you the number of attempts, the number of success, and the max tidal volume. So the number of success shows you how many times the patient were actually available to reach their goal, and max tidal volume, even if the patient doesn't reach their goal, it still tells you what's the highest volume that the patient's reached.
I'm on your website at the same time.
Awesome.
And I see and you may have it in your coming slides, the picture of right. Well, so to be clear then, the InSee is just the pink part.
Yes, yes. The incentive spirometer is a disposable device that's already existing. This specific model is made by Vire, which is about 60% of all incentive spirometers used. Our device right now works with the Vire, but it will also work with all other incentive spirometers.
So is it fair to say that all spirometers have the same base measurement and this could snap onto anything?
So that's a very good question. We made it so it would work with this type of incentive spirometer, but most incentive spirometer have a basically very common design. The changes are very minor. They all have a clear base. So with a little modification, we can modify this to work with other incentive spirometers as well.
By that you mean with a new mold?
I'll jump in and kind of tell you at
Okay, Alex, thank you.
Yeah, the technology in the aspect of the laser and the concept and the patent, etc., covers all incentive spirometers. Given our introductory aspect of putting it into the market, clinical trials, we decided to go with the Vire because that's just such a majority. At the end of the day, the technology is available for any of them, but just like you said, the only thing that changes is the mold that just has to be done, and you insert the circuit board, the timer, the screen, all of that stuff into any mold that you want to do. Right now, given the stage that we are at with our clinical trials acceptance are moving forward, we went with the most commonly one used in the emergency rooms, whereas Vire has about 60 to 65% of the market, and the other 7 or 8 types of incentive
Sounds like a good place to start.
Combined, they only have maybe 30% of the market. And so for financial aspects, we went for that. But the concept works all across the board. You just have to change the mold, basically.
When I saw when Mehdi held up the base, well, without your device on it, it just looked like dumb plastic. So how is your plastic thing talking through a dumb piece of plastic? Like, how does that work?
The aspect of the laser is an infrared laser that basically uses the measurements of the air gap that we have calculated, and that each one can calibrate exactly to the almost 100 millimeter difference in the volume. So each one, and that was all of the, and we'll get to that, but the FDA, the EUA concept, they actually used those measurements and confirmed that we were 97% accurate in all of our readings.
Okay, we've not met, so you don't know that I'm perfectly comfortable being the guy who sounds like he doesn't know what he's talking about, which is not infrequent. But the laser basically is pointing to the blue part.
If you show
the first thing that's not clear, and therefore it bounces off that.
If you look at that little raised, and Mehdi can take it off if he wants, but that little raised area has an infrared laser right on it, and it hits the bottom of the circumference of the blue. So that elevated part right there, that black dot on the raised, that is the infrared laser right there. And Mehdi, if you want to show the bottom of the incentive spirometer. So you see that hole, there's actually a circle on the inside, but the laser is trajected into the coordinate of the
cavity.
And it can be, it's universal. It can be left or right, however you want to put it. But the bottom line is that it catches that. And that's where our calibration goes to when it measures 0.
I can even follow that. And the other third of the market, they all have a cavity like that as well?
Exactly the same. Because again, you have to think all of these aspects are used to make it as cheap as possible. That incentive spirometer that he's holding right now is what, a couple cents worth of plastic. And
Doctor,
so
what is your background? Are you a pulmonologist? Maybe
no, I'm an emergency room doctor.
Okay.
And so we are one of the hardest hit with COVID right now. We'll get into how that's affecting us. And so that's where we kind of came up with the concept of.
And presumably, it's probably obvious, but I'll say that it's because of COVID that you went the EUA route?
100%. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And do you think without a pandemic, that wouldn't even be a thing, right?
Oh, no, it would. And I'll tell you, and we're getting to that, but the United States spends $10 billion on hospital-acquired pneumonia a year. In fact, I'll just give you a quick background. Anytime that you have any measurements of meetings in the hospital world, whether it's called HCAHPS or anything that's used for reimbursement,
right? Anytime
Medicare, Medicaid, especially government funding has reimbursement, it's measured on a series of checkpoints. And one of the biggest ones is, for example, congestive heart failure, hospital-acquired infections, and pneumonia is one of the highest checkpoints that it causes. So if you have a hospital that's consistently failing on these checkpoints, their reimbursement for Medicare and Medicaid goes down dramatically. And that's why every month when you have a meeting with your C-suite people, one of the few questions are, what are our hospital-acquired infections? What's our fall risk? What is our HCAP score? What's our patient satisfaction? These are all top priorities that they're consistently working. So the market is $10 billion for hospital-acquired pneumonia. And that's where it originated from, the hospital-acquired pneumonia.
If I'm not mistaken, Hassan is another team member?
Yes,
I'll
he
bring
just
him on
joined.
camera as well.
Oh, sure. Oh, is he here? Perfect.
Yep, he's
Yeah,
here.
he made it. Hey, Hassan. Yeah, so just like Dr. Fatima said, initially our goal was to focus on pneumonia because 20% of patients that are hospitalized use it instead of spirometer, and it's mainly used so patients don't get pneumonia 2-3 days when they go back home. So that was our focus, and we were making progress until the pandemic hit. And I'm going to let Dr. Fatima take it on from here.
And it looks like, Hassan, you are at a hospital right now, and maybe that's why you've chosen to keep your sound off. Or is it loud there?
Yeah, no, I'm in our call room right now. Actually, I just got a very sick COVID patient into my room 1 resuscitation room, and it's insane. Like every patient coming in is with COVID. It's actually a husband-wife. The wife came in an ambulance, and the son drove the husband in. Both patients are in the ER right now, and I've resuscitated them, and they're waiting to get a bed on the floor, which will take hours probably.
You resuscitated them?
Yeah, fluids, steroids, significant amount of oxygen. I had to put a central line in one because she was so dehydrated. We couldn't get an IV in her, so I had to put a big IV in her neck. Yeah, this is par for the course with these sick people who come in with COVID.
Help me understand, when one is an ER doctor, they still have a specialty. I mean, perhaps you studied cardiology, and Alex, you studied pulmonology, or
no,
do you
ER is its
an
own.
ER doctor?
ER is its own thing. Emergency room is its own thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but the reason we're so focused on hospital-acquired pneumonia because all these patients, initially they come back through the ER, and we can look at their previous hospital stays and see that, well, this person was just discharged like a week ago. Like, why are they back with pneumonia? What happened?
Right.
And that's why this led us down the road of the InSee. And because it's more common in like hip fracture patients, they get their hip replaced, but they're laid up in bed. They don't get up and move around. They're so prone to pneumonia. That was the initial market for the InSee. And then we started on this well before the pandemic, and then COVID hit, and we quickly saw that the incentive spirometer quickly became standard of care for COVID patients, but it's limited in the same thing that we always know. It's an analog device. It doesn't keep track of measurements. It's all based on patient self-report. The patients have no way to be reminded to do their incentive spirometer unless the nurse or respiratory therapist walks in every hour to remind them. And even outside the pandemic, that's not feasible. We don't have the manpower to babysit a patient. So these were all the reasons why the InSee was important before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic hit, it became more of a pressing need. And that's why we decided to go the EUA road, because of the Federal Declaration of Emergency. EUA applications opened up. But I'll let
you mentioned that there was no way to remind patients. Is there any kind of reminder alarm device on there to say it's time to use the thing?
Yeah, so the InSee actually has two reminders. It has a visual and an audio, and you can basically change that based on minutes. On average, when a respiratory therapist goes in to try to tell the patient to use it, they say, okay, every commercial break, you need to use this about 5 times. Mm-hmm. And so that's an average of around 10 to 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. Our device can be set, right now it's just programmed for 10 minutes, but you can change it, but every 10 minutes, a red light starts flashing and a very annoying buzzer comes on. And the only way to turn those off is you have to inhale and you can have the option to turn it on and off. But it's used in that aspect to kind of help with the reminding of the patient.
That's funny, a very annoying buzzer. Would you please breathe so I don't have to listen to that?
That's exactly what we're thinking, yeah. And the good news is we actually have the exact opposite as a form of positive reinforcement, that when you reach your goal, a green light comes on to kind of show you, hey, congratulations, and a very charming chime comes on to make you feel better about yourself.
Is it an audio file that, someone will be like, dun, 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 or we'll have the InSee one that's like, oh, that's their signature noise?
Oh, yeah. It's actually
the version 3.0 is going to have fireworks coming out of it every time.
I don't know if you'll get that cleared, but I understand. Thank you. All right, let's go back to our previously scheduled presentation.
So starting off with this, as you can see, this is actually a PBS NewsHour that was done on the right about a significant concept of or overwhelmingness of resources in Louisiana. And as you can see, they're using the Vyaire incentive spirometer, and he is literally a COVID patient, inhaling, exhaling, well, I mean, inhaling with that. And on the left is the exact same Vyaire, and this is in India. And so these are literally like patients that are constantly using this. And just to validify the other aspect, Vyaire has a huge market on this, because even in India, they're using, that form of the incentive spirometer. That's where we were when we said, okay, why are we, you can go to the next slide, Matthew. Yeah. Right now, our resources are being depleted. And when we have a significant amount of sick people that are going into the ICUs, they are the sickest ones. The med surge are the more sick, they're sick mild to moderate range, okay? And that's the biggest difference between ICU and med surge, is that the med surge, the regular floor, does not require that much consistent care. They require enough care, obviously, that they can't go home, but not enough that they have to be managed even hourly or every 30 minutes by an ICU personnel. Right now, our emergency room, our floors, and our ICUs are overwhelmed. And one of the biggest factors that we started using InSee for was, how can we use this as a monitor to take the patients that are right on the border of going home and needing to be in the hospital, and how can we get them to go home, handle it more conservatively, so that we can possibly free up some beds for the more moderate sick people to come into the hospitals. And so with that, with the InSee, what we're trying to do is utilize or implement a program so that when the patients come in, we're like, okay, your oxygen level is right around 89, 90%. That is the norm for COVID. You are not significantly sick enough to be admitted. Let's try and send you home. Here's the device. This is the, and we have been sending patients home with incentive spirometers, but now we have this device that say, these are the numbers that you look for. If you're getting worse, if you're not able to reach these goals more readily, you need to come back to the ER. If we can even save 15 to 20% of these patients from being admitted to the hospital, that will significantly decrease the amount of wait times, hold times, and admissions to the hospital to basically allow the staff to kind of, and I'll use a term that we used originally, flatten the curve. But right now, when no one wants to be the guy that sends that patient home and they get worse because they have no way to monitor him. And so we're just admitting everyone that's even on the edge. And so with the InSee in our program, we're trying to get them to be able to go home. And again, even 15 to 20% is a significant number right now when we're talking 6, 8, 10, 12, 2 days of holding the patient in the emergency room because we do not have a bed.
Wow. And
so we'll go to the next slide here.
Where are you in terms of production? Are these in market?
So as of right now, we are finalizing at literally right this second, our entire final thing to get the schematics to be able to go into mass production with a company called ABX. And they are in San Francisco. Right now, as soon as we get the final thing, which hoping we will get by the end of this week or next, we can take all of those schematics and send it. And they have the injection mold, the people. And so we're hoping by February of 2022 to have 1,000 units ready to go. It's not a lot, but again, funding, it's very expensive. And so we're trying to ramp it up as fast as we can, trying to get government funding, reaching out to Harris County, which is in Houston, to get, some type of contract, whatever we can do. All we need now is basically the funding to ramp it up.
I'm going to open it to the floor if anyone wants to raise their hand or leave a comment. I'm thinking maybe you, Jonathan, since you're very much racing against the clock as it relates to COVID as well. If there's any tricks you picked up along the way that might be able to help, maybe Paul, maybe you have an idea. John, anyone who has some ideas that could potentially shave some time off their production, that'd be okay. Well, Paul, I'll bring you on. And I'm curious, Hassan, these folks that you admitted today, vaccinated or unvaccinated?
All unvaccinated. Not even a chance.
99% of, I don't want to say 99, let's say 95% of all significantly ill patients are unvaccinated.
And so the other reason for why we're finalizing the device right now is we, at my hospital here in El Campo, Texas, we got about 10 units to just give to patients, got approved by the hospital board. The chief of staff loved the device. We're using it on patients here, and we got really valuable, patient feedback. And one of the things that was happening, believe it or not, was that patients, one or two patients got smart, and in order to turn the alarm off, what they did was they turned the entire device upside down. And when the piston fell, the InSee registered that as an attempt because it measures the distance between the sensor and the piston. So the patient didn't even have to inhale, they just turned it upside down. So what we're doing for this version that we're currently hopefully almost done with is we took our existing design and we added a gyrometer, accelerometer. So InSee will know when it's upside down so people can't do that. And we're also improving the charger interface, so it's a better reliable connection when you want to charge it, and just other smaller upgrades there.
I can't help but laugh that people are like, how can I disable this life-saving piece of equipment?
People will do whatever they can.
And somebody straight up turned it off. They read the instructions and they held the button and they straight up turned it off.
Yeah. So ultimately, what I think will be a really invaluable aspect of the InSee is if you can imagine a pressure switch where when the incentive spirometer clips into the InSee, that pressure switch is activated, and only then the InSee turns off and on. So we're going to try and minimize as many buttons, as much interface as possible to interfere. It's kind of like a thermometer that when you take it out of its charging casing, it's automatically on. There is no button to turn on. So these are things that we're doing. But right now, as Alex said, we're up against the clock to try and.
I don't imagine you have this functionality yet. A friend of ours, Dr. Brent Lang, created the first remote patient monitoring device for urology, and it's equipped with an RFID chip that throws the information into the sky and down to the urogynecologist's screen.
Yeah.
I don't imagine you have RFID yet, and if not,
that's our version 2, and that's another screen. This entire
so that's going to come before the fireworks. I thought,
yeah,
simultaneously, hopefully, yeah.
Okay.
But our goal is to basically have the charging station that we have it in, is the interface is going to be on the charging station so that the nurse's station can automatically look to see what each patient is doing without even entering the room. And that's in the works. But
they should be able to turn the alarm off and on. They can change the goal from a screen that's integrated to the charging base. Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
If you think you'd find value in a conversation with Brent, I'll happily make that introduction.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I know I brought you on first, but Jonathan, you had an idea about money.
Yeah, I know that doctors typically don't have the best reputation of being business people, and I mean no offense by that. It's just it's a stereotype.
That is absolutely right.
But at the same time, there are certain doctors who understand intimately what you're doing and can rationally understand a very simple business plan. And that's how we got our initial funding. We went directly to doctors who understood what we were doing. We were converting a malaria test to a COVID test, and they realized that was an easy step forward. And we got all of the funding within a month. So I would recommend targeting doctors who understand your game plan, and don't waste a lot of time with. If they want whining and dining, that's the wrong target. If you got somebody who understands it right away, get to the ask.
In your case, Jonathan, how did you compile a list of doctors you felt would get it?
We went to the areas where COVID started to tick up early, like in the Bay Area. It was pretty easy because they were already seeing signs of it in Seattle, in some of these hotbeds, in New York. And
I'm asking about logistics. Were you just dialing for dollars? Give me the names of all the doctors in the ER in Mount Sinai. And you just froze.
And of course, Sorry for my internet connection.
That's okay.
And of course,
So the answer is
we
yes.
started to network. Once we talked to this immunologist, once we talked to this virologist, little by little, we navigated through. We got referred to people, and within, I think, a week's time, we identified the right people, and within a month, we got $4 million.
Okay, Hassan, I see that you'd like to talk to Eddie about your location. He might know somebody who can help you out with. You are on mute, sir.
Yeah, I was thinking that we can put our Tidal Med contact info in there, and Eddie can send us an email. We would love to, explore his connections and get with him. But we'll type our emails in the chat.
An anonymous attendee said that they're really interested to see how this changed your view of medical devices. I would not say, so let's run back to the presentation, but rather to our anonymous friend. This will be recorded. We'll get there. And as much as this is to educate all of us, I love these sessions in particular when we're dealing with someone who is a manufacturer and how we can collectively as a group share our knowledge and help. Paul, do you want to throw in something quickly?
Yeah, guys, congratulations. I love what you guys are doing. There are 2 areas, potentially 3 areas I could help you, or we should really have conversations. One is, I just texted a friend of mine, Karen Rands, who runs an angel group. She wrote a book on conscious capitalism and has a database of 3,000 angels. I'd like to connect you guys together to see if she's got a focus group that's interested in medical devices. The second thing is, one of my clients, and in fact, I'm talking next week at the same event over here with Joe. We're in the medical device contract manufacturing and logistics space. We're an FDA contract manufacturer for medical devices. So as you ramp, we can really bring in like what we call the last mile manufacturing and do the assembly here in the US, which will allow you to then, if you do modular design, we can very quickly do the upgrades version 2, version 3 in the US, protect your IP if that's relevant, but you can do your thinking and your processing and your iterations, and then we can make the changes very quickly without having to go to another country or what have you, right here in the Bay Area. So there's a resource at the right time. I can help you with that.
Yeah,
And
I think
thirdly, yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask you a question real quick, Paul, on that? Is one of our biggest, I don't want to say concerns, but unknowings is injection molds. It's very expensive. It can take up to 3-4 weeks. The ones that we're doing is going to be in China. Ultimately, I've heard that there's different variations, whether it's with different materials and things like that. And so one of the biggest things that I have is, where can we get, if anyone has connections on creating an injection mold in a shorter amount of time, because that itself is going to take almost 2 months. Which is,
Andre, do you
I can absolutely help you with that.
I'm just calling on Andre, who's in the contract manufacturing space as well. You can raise your hand, or if you have a comment, if you have any insights on that. And there's Andre. This gentleman will be wearing a tie. Very well appointed, sartorially excellent. Domino.
I'm here.
All right.
With my tie.
Thank you, sir.
So I was hearing the comments regarding the injection molding, and there's a couple of vendors that we use when we have to do some proof of concept where there's an amortization of the mold up front, and they're very quick. And those are people like Protomold, for example. We've used Protomold many times for getting, in essence, very economical upfront molds, literally in a week or 2, and then getting parts. And of course, the piece part is going to be higher, but it reduces your overall upfront investment. And so, there are a couple of vendors like that. I could hook you up with them. We use them all the time, and specifically for proof of concept. But then we actually have some products, when they're not in high volume, they continue with those molds, or at some point when the investment is worth it, of course, then you can convert to full steel molds and multiple ups and so forth. So that it's a process of iteration once you get there. But up front, I know what it's like to get something started, and that's a great way to get a product going on an injection mold basis.
Kevin, you had both a comment that might help and a question for the group.
Yeah, I've gone through some of the people that do rapid prototyping, and you kind of need to call around. As Andre said, some will kind of amortize the cost long run. Other people obviously want you to pay up front. Most of what I've been doing recently isn't actually molding. We're dealing with extrusion, but we wind up with the same issues because we sometimes need to do modification on extrusion dies. So, there are a bunch of people around. I actually happened to come across somebody here in New Jersey for that kind of by accident. looking for something else. But there are quite a few people around. And then I don't know if they had also considered just on the prototyping phase, just going with 3D printing versus injection molding.
Mhm.
So we're currently doing 3D printing right now. The problem is that Mehdi, if you can show the InSee, there's a lip on there that on the 3D mold, it actually gets screwed in, which works great. The problem is that over time, obviously those screws can kind of come loose.
Yeah, it's a little bit weaker with 3D printed.
Right. And so injection mold, or, our goal is to basically make that entire plastic 3D into one piece versus
But
two.
for the prototyping, I mean, have you looked at additive manufacturing actually for the prototype with metal instead of plastic, just to finalize the form? Because then you can play around, you don't have the weakness of the plastic, and you can play around with it a little bit more.
I'll be honest, we haven't really explored anything other than injection mold, in a sense of, we just said, you know what, we just need to get this. Let's kind of just absorb the cost. The time frame was things. That's where we came up with February of 2022, is that 6 weeks to 8 weeks to injection mold process, and then ramping up the production. Hopefully we'll have, February-ish to be done, which isn't out of the question. It's just the problem is that, and I'll admit, the hesitancy is, once you create that injection mold, it's $20,000. And if there's even the slightest bit of variation in the circuit board, the PCB, you have to change something, you got to scrap that entire injection mold. And so,
Yeah, but
One quick
that's why
administrative note, please. Eddie, I know you're jumping off the call. You can find Mehdi on Premium, and you can connect with him that way. And Mehdi, I hope this demonstrates how you should have shown up before, because all these resources were here waiting for you. So every once in a while, pop your head in, because that's kind of the concept we have going here. And I'm loving this conversation, because it just fills my heart when everyone jumps in and has something to contribute. It just really makes
Absolutely.
so.
But yeah, I mean, if you're looking to finalize that form, you might want to just think about, if it's from a strict engineering standpoint, that you kind of maybe look at alternatives other than just plastic, because whether you go either additive with a metal form, or even somebody can really do precision CNC and turn that into something like aluminum just to get to the shape, that can be turned around actually really quickly. I mean, my next door neighbor here actually does that, with turnarounds over a weekend.
oh, wow. Well, that is definitely something that we need to kind of come up with in the next less than 2 weeks. So
Yeah.
I would love to kind of chat further with whoever. And I know, Paul, you said you had a lot of thoughts in that area, so I would, appreciate whatever help we can get.
Yeah, and then my other question, though, aside from the comments on your prototyping, my question was for something like this, that's kind of a modification on something that's already used. I mean, at the hospital level, does this have to go through a clinical practice committee for review, or
So
does the
yes and
evaluation get
no.
made that it's just a better form of what we're already doing?
Yeah, so yes and no. Ultimately, the EUA that we received, that kind of, obviously takes care of a lot of concerns that what we call the IRB, the Internal Review Board. And that's consistent of multiple people in the hospital board that basically look at anything that comes in. They look at the cause, risk versus benefit, et cetera. And so, yes, it has to be cleared by them, but given the EUA, that automatically catapults us into a level of confidence that it doesn't have to be scrutinized too much.
Yeah.
The second portion is, this is a non-invasive thing. The patient in reality never even touches it, right? Because they're holding the incentive spirometer. It's not going into anyone. They're not putting their mouth on anything. So that also helps with it. So to answer your question, anything that goes in has to be approved by some type of board or medical IRB, internal review board. But essentially where we are right now is a very quick and easy transition to get it into the patients, given that it's non-invasive as well.
Yeah. Okay. And then my only other comment is, you might want to take a look. It's a little bit hard to navigate, but whether or not there's anywhere, if you're looking for funding through BARDA, because they have a lot of different avenues, related to COVID.
Is that BAR?
BARDA, which I got to look up what it means every time. Give me one sec. It's a government agency, and they're tied in really to everybody, NIH, CDC, and everything like that. Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. They do a lot of non-dilutive grant funding to get things commercialized. But again, you're dealing with the government, so it's a little bit hard to actually find the information. But they have obviously a lot of stuff related to COVID right now, and I know that because I'm dealing with trying to get through some of their objectives on the PPE side.
All right.
Thank you,
Perfect.
Kevin. And by all means, Mehdi, we'll share your information with the
Absolutely. Yeah.
with the group. Let's get back to your presentation.
So this is our famous co-founder here, Hassan Kakli. He's been on CNN, on CBS, and you know, ultimately, and not to steal his spotlight, I know he has to kind of come in and go, but I'll kind of give you a brief of what happened in his story.
He's very photogenic.
Beautiful, beautiful.
The
man.
camera loves him.
And if you look here, our friend Dan Rather, close and personal friend now, retweeted this entire story here. Please watch and spread the word. So us and Dan right now, we're right there. We're right
Now,
there.
I'd love to, as a marketer, I'd love to know how you got this coverage.
So the story basically begins a couple weeks ago. Hassan was working at one of the emergency rooms there in El Campo.
Hey, who's that guy over your shoulder? Someone's photo.
Oh, this is Kinger. He's one of our anesthesiologists here at the hospital. He knows all about the InSee. He loves it from an anesthesia standpoint. He's a real champion of it.
And so what happened is that a few weeks ago, a 46-year-old U.S. Army veteran vaccinated, presented to the emergency room with kind of upper diffuse abdominal pain. And pretty much Dr. Kakli worked him up, discovered that he had a gallstone that was also lodged inside his gallbladder and in between his pancreas, causing what's called gallstone pancreatitis. During this period, this diagnosis basically requires a surgical intervention to remove the stone to prevent further buildup of pressure and fluids into the organs. The problem is that this vaccinated US veteran who needed a simple procedure that's very common could not be transferred to a hospital that can do the procedure because every hospital in the Houston metropolitan area was full completely from COVID patients. And the problem is that he was ICU level, so he needed intensive care. And so they had the ability to do the procedure, but they didn't have the ability to place him in a bed afterwards so that he could not be accepted. So fast forward hours and hours, this patient now, his organs are slowly starting to decompensate. His kidneys started going out, his blood pressure started dropping. Dr. Kakli had to put in another central line, which is a huge IV, put him on significant amount of fluids, antibiotics, vasopressors to bump up his blood pressure. All in the meantime, still looking for a bed, still getting no. He goes on Facebook. He starts pleading to anybody that he knows in this Facebook group that he's on with doctors. He gets phone calls from Missouri, other states, Arizona, wherever. They're all calling him. They're like, hey, I can do this. Send him over. As soon as we call the transfer center, they're like, no, we don't have a bed. Or that doctor will text him back 5 minutes later, like, hey, man, I just checked with administration. We can't get a bed. So even after exploring other states, this individual still cannot get a bed.
It sounds to me from Jonathan's story that those would be great candidates for angel investing.
100%. And so finally, he ended up getting a room at the VA there in Houston. They're getting him on the helicopter. They're flying him over there. By the time he gets there, his organs were so badly damaged and his intestines basically started going through ischemia, meaning they were losing blood. And he was so sick that they had to resuscitate him, meaning that they had to perform CPR, and he ended up dying. This was a case that literally happens throughout all of America, where non-COVID vaccinated patients are not getting the care that they need because the facilities that can handle them are overwhelmed with COVID patients. And that is the reality that we've seen. And that is why we started getting such news publicity, especially after it hit Facebook. David Grogan came from CBS and interviewed him, came back again just a week ago and did another story about him. CNN did a story about it, and it just got a lot of national press. And again,
yeah, ProPublica just published an article a couple days ago on the front page about a 12-year-old boy whose appendix ruptured while he was waiting 7 hours to be seen in the ER, which when appendicitis happens, you always want to get the surgery before the appendix ruptures because it makes the case much more complicated and lethal. And also in that article, ProPublica interviewed me and tacked on the story of Daniel Wilkinson, the veteran, just more examples of the case of, we're overcrowding, we're boarding in the ER. We can't find a place to put patients.
Was the veteran in your hospital or
This was
tried to come to your hospital?
Not this hospital here. It's another ER I work at in Belleville, which is like also
But how
outside,
did,
just
how did
outside
you
the
get
greater
to be
Houston area.
the expert that they called on? How did you get on camera?
Because the Facebook post went viral. A doctor on Facebook was like, "Hey, Dr. Cackley, I know David Begner. He's the lead national correspondent with CBS News. He might be interested in doing a piece on this story." And I was like, "Sure." So David literally came the next day to Houston and interviewed me. And the story first went on CBS Morning Live.
Then it went from there. And when they interviewed you, did that present an opportunity for you to talk about your invention, or was it strictly about the, did you kind of weave that in and what you were doing about it?
No, it was just strictly about the case. However, since then, a lot of people have contacted me on LinkedIn and follow me on Twitter, etc. And we've explored some connections to see where they go. When they've asked me, what can we do to help? And I'm like, well, actually, my friends and I, we are working on this product that we think can help. And so there's been some interest in people who've reached out to me after seeing the stories.
Fair enough. And you can add this video to your arsenal. It's available for your use however you see fit. Mehdi, you want to take us back?
Yeah, so go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of a lot of this we've kind of touched base on now. And that's where, again, we originally came up with the EUA concept of saying, let's apply for it. And so this is all according to the EUA. If you go to the FDA and you go under EUA section and Tidal Medical, this is their words, not ours. And so according to this that was given to us in June of 2021, they have confirmed that the InSee may be effective in treating respiratory conditions in patients with COVID-19 in hospital settings by quantifiably tracking patient usage of incentive spirometers. They said that there are no FDA approved or cleared devices for quantifiably tracking patient usage of spirometers as an aid in treatment for respiratory conditions in hospital settings. And again, they said InSee demonstrated 97% accuracy of spirometer measurements. So after seeing these are their quotes that are on the FDA website. And so that's when we move forward. And this is just basically an outline of why this is so important. And one of the biggest features is the coaching, compliance tracking, and tidal volume analysis, all which are subjective currently in the state that we are, because we have no way of identifying it, and now turning that into an objective quantifiable number. And again, the benefits: help patients remain compliant. There's a buzzer, there's a red alarm that goes off. It knows which patients are at high risk. So when the provider is looking at this and they see a significant decline in the number of successes, number of attempts, the number of tidal, or what the tidal volume is, if they're noticing a decline, they know that this is more a high-risk patient. We need to utilize more resources on them. And again, the early detection and risk stratification. Seeing who's at high risk, knowing that they can turn bad faster, utilizing more resources, and targeting them to prevent further respiratory complications.
Seeing tidal volume analysis, I had made the connection before, and recognizing the name of your company is Tidal Medical Technologies.
Yep.
Is this, and it's a very significant one, but are you planning this one product, or do you have other concepts related to?
We already have at least a couple more devices that we've already worked on patenting, but again, we're only a couple people, and the funding is extremely expensive to lift 2 products off the ground. But
Yes, of
we
course
literally have weekly conversations about what's our next product. It's not something that we're like ramping right now, but definitely in the works. We have a few other products for sure.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if there are a few people on this call or may listen to it in the future who would be interested in working with you. And I don't know what you might be able to offer in terms of equity instead of pay or whatever, but
yeah,
consider that.
Our goal, our mantra is called micro-fixing. And we learned, how can we take a problem that we are constantly focused on in the ER and fix it by adding or changing a little bit of the process to improve the outcome. So in a way, it's not like we're creating this massively new concept. We're
Right.
just fixing a problem that we're constantly seeing.
Would you say that's a common mindset among all ER doctors?
I think it's a common
Microfixing?
mindset above all innovators more than anything. I don't think that you're going to have multiple people in every field that constantly go to work every day and ask themselves, how can we make things better? And you're going to have the same people that go in there and they're like, I get off at 7 p.m. and
Okay, fair enough.
And so I think it's an innovator concept that.
Thank you.
But ultimately, our goal with the InSee, as Alex said, is to really, it's a very simple device, but we're hoping it leads to a paradigm shift in how a clinician practices as using the tidal volume as an additional vital sign. Because right now we look at heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, pulse oximetry, and temperature. That's basically it. But now that we can quantifiably measure the tidal volume, so tidal volume is just how much air you move into your lungs with each breath. If we can reliably track that, which the InSee does, into a quantifiable number, well, in the same way, just like we can trend a patient's blood pressure over time, trend their heart rate over time, and we can see trends that are very valuable, like, okay, this patient is getting septic, this patient is getting dehydrated, we can see the vital signs moving in that direction. We really want the tidal volume to be that important vital sign. And with COVID, we know the pulse oximetry is not enough. It's not nearly enough to tell, but pulse oximetry in combination with what the patient's tidal volume is, we're hoping that clinicians will start using that in order to risk stratify their patients and make clinical decisions.
Thank you. Luke, you had a comment?
Yes. Hi, guys. As an electrical engineer, I'm really envious about your invention. So that's a compliment.
Thank you.
And Joe, I guess Michelle is not on the call today.
She is.
She is. Oh, I thought she would jump in on about what if the emergency use authorization is over and you want to put it in the market as a regular medical device.
Michelle, if you're able to come on, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll promote you to panelist. Yeah, and there she is.
There she is. Okay, then she can take over because it's always hard to retrofit a medical device into the regulation. You should start yesterday with documenting and the rest.
Yeah, that's actually all. We've already pretty much essentially gone through the 510K outline, and that is something that we are already, fully aware of in a sense of time frame. The same individuals that we use for our EUA is also helping us with the FDA full approval for the 510K. He actually works for Johnson & Johnson, and he was responsible for getting the EUA and working on FDA clearance for the vaccine. We met him through a stroke of fate, and he's actually been helping us tremendously with that. The FDA, the EUA concept, I feel like is going to be around for at least another 6 months to 12 months. You have to think, as soon as the EUA goes away, so do all the vaccines that aren't FDA approved. And so until we have a lock on the vaccine, the EUA is not going anywhere.
In my role, Alex, I have a chance to meet people from every discipline, and I have like a mind that Jan is my packaging person, and this one is my reimbursement person. I hear the letters EUA, and I think of Michelle. She spent a great deal of time reading far too much about this topic. Michelle, what do you have to say about this?
Yep. So the EUA, while it is like an umbrella, like, okay, it just says this is an emergency situation. And then it has basically EUAs underneath it that are product specific. And so the ones for particular products or applications can be pulled. Like the mask one, I anticipate, they just updated it again. They're creating new standards. I anticipate the mask one may go away. The N95 respirator one for KN95s did go away. So I wouldn't necessarily say that correlate the vaccines going away with yours is safe. And then secondly, that's great because I had put some stuff in the chat asking about your regulatory plan and strategy. So that's great that you're working with a professional on that. But does he already have you doing like basic design controls and risk management and some things so that you don't have to reverse engineer your design and development process?
So as of right now, to answer your question, no, simply. And a lot of it has to do with we have not finalized our design yet. I mean, that again is kind of what we're talking about, is that's what's literally happening right this second with our group in Utah. And they're basically creating our final product. That final product, when we go into mass production, is going to be our FDA paperwork. That is the exact schematics, battery, laser, screen, FEC, all those types of things. It's going to be that. And so currently we just haven't been able to do it because we don't have the finalization of exactly which parts we're going to use for that.
Another way you can tackle that is putting into your quality agreement with your contract manufacturers, because they're going to have to be FDA registered. They likely have design controls, is have them, like, a part of what they have to turn over to you is a completed design control packet, including a DHF and DMR.
And sorry, I'm not familiar with those. So is that like a?
Let me this is a perfect time for me to interject. The fellow who's helping you said, is it J&J? Is he a full-time J&J and helping you on the side? Because he may be excellent, but this is what she does all day. So
no, that's definitely something, like, he is a great person, a resource that we've used. So obviously we're always looking to kind of go, but no, it's not anything that he does full-time for us, at least. He's just kind of helped us through it. But yes, it is a process, so we can definitely use all the help and guidance that we can get, for sure. Because
I'm glad you met her today then.
So a DHF is a design history file, and a DMR is a device master record. And those are kind of the pinnacles of the end of the design control process. And those are all documents that are required by the FDA. And that process ultimately gives you the documents that you have to put in your submission.
I see. And is that something that normally, like, it's an ISO certification, right? Like a company is that ISO? Is that the correct term?
No. So the FDA, as of yet, doesn't require ISO certification, although design controls is also a part of ISO, but the FDA follows something called the quality system regulation.
I see.
And so that's a subset of the quality system regulation, is design controls.
I think
it's a part of a larger system that you're going to have the whole system by the time you get your 510K cleared.
I think it's clear to everyone on the call that a follow-up conversation between you makes sense.
Sure. 100%.
And Barbara asked, what company is Michelle with? Michelle is with Lean RAQA, and she has grown her little business into a cottage industry with a whole team now. So congratulations to you. Her services are very much in demand. Mehdi, take us, perhaps at some point we will, and I love that we've had so much contribution from the group. We haven't even been able to get to the name of the title.
No, thank you, everyone.
And I'm interested in it too. We'll call it at the bottom of the hour, no matter what. 90 minutes is as long as we've ever gone, and people are already dropping off, I understand, but there's a recording, of course, of this.
So go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so this is pretty much where our aspect goes, and we'll dive into just a superficial business model. We're going to be doing a subscription model, and that basically comes with a charging station. This is our prelim one, 5 units with a charging deck for a monthly subscription, and that basically allows us to, if one of them gets broken, it isn't working right, whatever, we just send them a new one. Our game plan is basically, on average, if you have a 100-bed hospital, you're utilizing about 25% of the patients are going to require an incentive spirometer of some sort, whether it's post-op, respiratory problems, ventilated patients, COPD, asthma. Obviously, with COVID right now, it's much more, but that's kind of the number that we're starting off with. So 100 beds require about 25 units, divide that by 5, so 5 packages to each hospital. And that's kind of the simplification.
Andre, you wanted to add something quickly?
Yeah, just real quick, with respect to the design history file that Michelle so pointed out so correctly, many times when we get inventors such as yourselves, medical doctors, that have come to us after they've gotten the product pretty much close to where they want it, you then have to go back and do a retrospective look at the design history file, which is problematic and can be pointed out by the FDA. So I just recommend, if your contract manufacturer is not used to doing that, that should be something.
You better get on it.
You should jump onto it right away, just to make sure you get that design history, because all of your iterations should be in that design history file, because it tells the FDA how you got to your conclusion. So just for emphasizing that point is very important.
Thank you, Andre.
Awesome.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and so this is basically where we are in version 2. What our concept are as far as like moving forward, having cellular, Wi-Fi, EMR integration, creating an app so that you can check in on grandma after she got home from her hip surgery. And data analysis and prediction modeling use. My brother and another person are actually kind of this is where my brother shines in a sense of artificial intelligence and utilizing algorithms to kind of identify the highest form of risk stratification for the patients, utilizing the numbers to monitor and predict a positive or negative outcome within 24 to 48 hours. So all fascinating stuff in a sense of moving forward in the future. But again, we're kind of putting the horse in front of the carriage in that sense. However, or the carriage in front of the horse. What's this saying?
I don't know, but your parents must be very proud. 2 doctors?
Trust me, he's the brains behind it. I'm just the guy that looks
Okay,
sexy
you're just the guy who
camera.
saves lives. I get it.
No, but this is, and I'll let Mehdi take over. But this is pretty much where we are, and this is the funding that we're utilizing. And
Mehdi, how did this change everything you know about medical devices? For God's sakes, please tell us.
So, like I said early on, I always had this vision that with medical device, you needed a lot of fundings, you needed to have a solid idea, and you needed to have this big apparatus of regulatory and quality, and it always seemed impossible. But this experience really showed me that if you have believers and if you have a solution that works, everything else will fall in place. Yeah, and with that, right, like we said, right now we're in the process of raising a seed fund. We've gone over the problem, what is the solution, and for our seed fund, we're trying to raise about $750,000. And with that, we're planning to use that fund to complete our clinical trials, get 510(k) clearance for hospital and home, manufacture 1,000 units, and also design version 2. And with that, again, closing highlight. Hospital-acquired pneumonia and prolonged COVID stays put a burden on our hospital system, and we've shown that there's clinical research that shows that instead of spirometer compliance could lead to lower the hospital stays, reduce rehospitalization and morbidity, and we believe with the InSee we can cover the triple aim measure, which is reduce cost of care, improve quality of care, and improve patient satisfaction. So with that, I want to thank everybody for your participation, for your questions, for your comments and your recommendations. It's been really, really helpful, really inspiring. Thank you, Joe, for making this happen. And after this call, I will jump on Slack and I will share everybody's information. And we look forward to this continued conversation. Thank you.
We have a channel called Our Weekly Call. You can put your information there and make your presentation available there. And it'll probably take me about a week to get this edited and up on the archive for everyone to enjoy. There was a comment about how can we get a transcript of this? Typically YouTube will generate one, but you can also go to Otter AI, that's OTTER.ai, and take any video and throw it in there and it will give you a transcription. It's imperfect, but it's pretty darn good. Mehdi, it's funny because I anticipated that with the name of your presentation that there were going to be like 4 slides about the things that but it was basically a sentence or 2 about how it changed everything you know. I'm not sure I could encapsulate what the big delta was for you, because you began to say, like, I thought that it was going to be this huge thing, and it is this huge thing. So what's your delta? What changed in your understanding?
I would say mostly was my belief.
It can happen.
No, it was mostly unbelief. Like I said, being in medical device for 15 years, I've gotten to a point where I thought you needed this massive amount of resources and funding to be able to do anything. And this experience taught me that it's not about the resources, but it's about the mission and the solution.
As a marketer, I think you just said if you have a valuable proposition that solves an unmet need, there's a market for that.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just translating it into marketing.
Well, because if you think about it, we were just 4 guys with an idea, and
4 smart guys.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, we basically made our own personal connections with George, who was our regulatory consultant, and we found this company VPI based out of Utah, and they worked with us about what we wanted the InSee to be, just Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting. And it was just kind of us spearheading everything with our own money. We didn't ask a dime from anybody else. And we were able to take this product from a napkin drawing to now it has FDA emergency use authorization that's published on the FDA website for all time. And we did that without really, like I said, an outside cent. And
The napkin drawing, what was the date of that napkin drawing? How long ago were we talking?
That was the first picture that me and Mehdi drew at you're on mute, Mehdi, but that was I think right around early 2019 or late 2018.
Do you still have the napkin?
Oh, that was the first picture that we showed you. Or that wasn't the napkin, but the picture that we showed you was that sketch that we took from the napkin and we put.
But do you in fact still have the napkin?
No, I think it was a metaphorical napkin. I don't think it was a real napkin.
I was about to say you need to have that napkin framed.
It was, but as an example, guys, what was really interesting, Alex and I had a meeting with another medical device inventor. He invented a novel way to do an abscess drainage. Great doctor, great guy. And on the phone call was this guy that he hired, or he gave up equity of his company and also, I'm sure, some kind of salary to be the CEO of the company and kind of lead the company. And this CEO guy was basically told me and Alex to our face, he's like, you're not going to get anywhere unless you hire somebody like me and pay someone like 150, 200 grand a year in order to manage your company and manage your product. That's really the only way you can get it out there. And we're like, really, we'll bet on ourselves. Thank you. And that was well before we got the EUA and our valuation and everything. So
I won't be surprised as people begin to drop off the call, but if you have a few more minutes, I'd like to just kind of, this concludes our formal presentation, but a few more notes if you have time. One is a question from Jan. She's had to jump off the call, and she's my packaging go-to person. She said, how did you do packaging and distribution testing? Electronics can sometimes be tricky. You don't have to address that publicly. You can. We can put you in touch with Jan if you have any question about that. But if you have a sentence or two, you're welcome to.
So currently, right now, we have done all of our stuff from VPI, which is literally creating it from scratch. However, our ABX that we talked about is our persons that we are in communication with. They are doing it from beginning to end. And so their entire process is injection mold, creating that parts, establishing it, calibrating it, packaging it, holding it. And this is actually one of the benefits of them. They are literally holding it in their storage, and they are not making us pay for it until they distribute it. Obviously, there's going to be a timeline, but we don't have to front them $1,000. I mean, $1,000.
The point I'll make is that there's a concept, a job called a packaging engineer. See if they actually have one. It's an afterthought for many people. Oh yeah, we have to put this in a box, but it's far more complicated than that. And in medical devices, the packaging is the medical device. It's not like, oh, and it's in a box. It's part of it.
Sure.
So it might be certainly worth a half hour's conversation with her at a minimum.
Awesome.
Yeah, but as far as the EUA goes, we did not have to submit any detailed schematics.
Fair enough. Well, you're going to live far beyond the EUA, we assume.
Yeah,
so
we just told the FDA that this company is going to be managing it, and that they were satisfied with that.
Okay. Now I'm going to change the subject entirely and tell you that I have, I don't know, foolishly, well-intentionedly attempted to use my voice, such as it is, to influence people on the fence about getting a vaccine. And I believe I've been wholly unsuccessful. I may have made some noise, I may have provoked and had people have conversation and the like. I'd be surprised if there's a human out there, I certainly don't know who it is, who, because Joe Hage wouldn't shut up about it, finally went ahead and rethought their position and went and got a vaccine. In fact, this last week, I may have lost a friend over it. It was like, I'm just enough of this, bashing and your bias and, et cetera, which is unfortunate. I posted a question in the great big group that I lead, asking, if there's any way that you see persuading someone of one camp to the other. And that's both ways. Someone who was pro-vaccine, like, oh, wow, okay, now I understand why I won't get it, and vice versa. And I shared an anecdote how when I was in New York last month, there was a protest in Union Square with the signs about, my body, my choice, don't get the vaccine, et cetera. And I approached a friendly group of folks and engaged them for a half hour. And I left defeated, feeling as though there was no data upon which we could agree. And in the absence of an absolute source of truth, that emotion, opinion, and in some cases, politics dictated what somebody would believe. A large setup for you guys are on the front line in the emergency room. You've seen the effects. Dr. Cackley said almost always they're unvaccinated. Certainly this husband and wife team that came in today, unvaccinated. Are you successful in persuading, perhaps you have a member of your own family who won't get vaccinated, or a friend, showed me a couple of articles and they said, nurses who are quitting their jobs over not getting the vaccine, they're not dumb, they're seeing what is happening. And he showed me another article that said, they're making reporting adverse events so difficult that it's like, I have too much to do. I'm not even going to, like they just want the story to be what the people want the story to be. I'll stop talking, and I'm interested in doctors' opinions on this.
I'll just say two things. Number one, I think one of the biggest factors is that if you want an answer on what we can do as healthcare providers, is sometimes I feel like if you just listen to a little bit of what their concern is, they talk out loud, and you basically just say, look, this is what it is, comfort their concerns, that may help. That's one of the easiest things that, a healthcare provider can do, is listen to what their concerns is. And you'll be surprised what comes out of some people's mouths. Some people's like, I heard you can't get pregnant after you get it. I heard it causes it. Like, these are just 100% false, So it's just one of those things where sometimes seeing what their concerns are, that's maybe a little bit of reassurance. Number two, opposition is always going to be part of life. I mean, just think about seatbelts, right? I'm sure everyone knows Ralph Nader. I mean, when he forfeited people to put seatbelts in the car, it was this massive, people were cutting out seatbelts in their own car, throwing it out the window, like, you will never be able to get me. And it's just part of, unfortunately, any process of change. And I'll end it with this in a sense of, I don't know if anyone knows Arthur Schopenhauer, but he's a super pessimistic philosopher. He had one of the greatest quotes. He said, if we as a country are prepared to have a Statue of Liberty on the East Coast, we must be prepared to have a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. And that is where we are in society. We are questioning our freedom and limiting our responsibility. And until we have some type of conglomerate there, we have been dealing with this for years. There is no magic formula to convince anyone to vaccinate. If they believe something, in the words of Mark Twain, it is easier to fool someone than it is to convince them that they have been fooled. And I don't know what the answer is. I just know that we can just listen. And I just quoted some philosophers for y'all, free of charge. So
absolutely. The thing is that we deal with this every day in medicine. We deal with the COPDer who won't stop smoking. We deal with the person with end-stage liver disease who wants to get a liver transplant and wants to live. They're continuing to drink. It's the same exact thing.
The infuriating thing for me is the examples you just described hurt them.
Yeah.
And really, quote unquote, only them and people who love them, but helping a variant spread it's everybody. And it's, the kid with the appendix. I didn't get vaccinated. I don't know that kid. What are you talking? It's like, we can't relate. We've seen it in the news, but that's the left-wing media, and they're just, pushing their agenda. And
yeah,
but people ultimately don't care about anybody else except their own freedoms and their own liberties. That's just the nature of the beast.
So are you guys saying, look, we're frontline and we've been, I'm sure you've been more successful than I have, because you've been able to look someone in the eye and say, look, if someone expired in my arms today, and they're like, well, shit, okay. I know this is what you do, but to me, it's like, what did you read, Joe, versus what I read? And I'm not.
Joe, that doesn't work.
They don't care.
Joe, that doesn't work.
They don't care.
Joe, that doesn't work either. So, Joe, what I do now for patients, because I see them in the ER after they already have COVID and they're struggling to breathe, this is my 1-minute speech. I say, sir, ma'am, I understand that you're unvaccinated. One thing that you could do, if you want to do it, you're not forced at all, but it's something if you want to do. I say to them, if you regret not getting vaccinated, I'm not asking you, you don't answer me. I'm just saying, if you regret it, one thing that you could do right now is get on your phone, get on your social media, get on your text messages, and get in contact with everyone in your life that you care about, your friends, your relatives, your coworkers, whoever you want to talk to. And if you regret not getting vaccinated, tell them that they should be vaccinated if you want to do that. Thank you. And I walk out of the room and I just let that simmer. Whatever they do, they do. Because I tell them, I say, sir, I say, people don't listen to doctors anymore, but your friends are going to listen to you because they know you, they trust you. They don't know me, they don't trust me. And if you want to do that, you could really help out our situation in the country right now. And then I literally just walk out of the room and let that simmer.
Let me ask you, I had someone forward me an article that said those who have recovered, I don't know if that's the term you would use, from COVID, that is, did not die, have 13 times the protection of someone who never had it but has been vaccinated. True, not true?
Yes, yeah, that's what
heard that?
the literature, that's what the literature says, is that natural immunity is much more effective than vaccine-related immunity.
That was his argument, and I said, well, I'd rather not get the thing first to recover from.
That's exactly true. You don't want to roll the dice and get COVID naturally in order to get immune, because you don't know, are you going to be the ones who get COVID that your lungs are going to go to total crap? Are you going to get a blood clot? Are you going to get a heart attack? The amount of blood clots and heart attacks and strokes we've seen in patients who either have COVID or recently recovered from COVID, astronomical. I got off the phone with a radiologist who was reading a CAT scan of the lungs, and he was exasperated. He said, I have not seen this many scans with massive pulmonary embolisms, and they're all in patients who had a history of COVID. It's insane. It's absolutely, so, you don't want to risk it. But I think if more people get this out there, that the truth comes to light, that natural infection is much more effective than vaccine mediated immunity, then I think you're going to have a bunch of COVID parties all around the country, and that could be even more dangerous. But at the same time, I do think we need to honor natural immunity. So if there's a vaccine mandate among healthcare workers, I think it should exclude people who can prove and show that they've previously had COVID, because those who've had COVID previously, I don't think they need a vaccine.
And I'm curious to know if now, okay, Jana's come back. She said, that's what happened to me in August 2020. She blood clotted and she had a heart attack.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's common. And unfortunately, these are the people that you may not think, well, I've never been sick that bad. It's all about percentages, unfortunately. And the problem is that when you see in a community where, most of the patients, if they get COVID, they don't have that bad of symptoms. And so it's all a perception. But when you're looking at this on a global national scale, it's putting tremendous strain on the healthcare system. And that inadvertently is going to affect us all. And I think that's the connection that is so difficult to make, is that you are sitting at home with your neighborhood and you're still going out at restaurants and things like that, so you don't see it, versus what we see and the strain that it's put. And that's, I think, the connection that is just not registering. And that's one of the most difficult things to persuade people, is that it's really happening. Just because you're not seeing it directly doesn't mean it's not putting that.
And it's true that the vast majority of people with COVID, yeah, they get the sniffles, they feel bad for a couple days, and then they feel fine. That is the vast majority of people. The problem is that those aren't the people in the hospital that are taking up the resources. Those are the ones who get really very sick. And probably the worst condition to have with COVID is being obese. It's insane. We're seeing patients who are 30 years old, don't take any medicines, were previously healthy, didn't have any chronic medical problems, and just have obesity, and they're the ones who end up on ventilators. We have people in our ICU right now who've been in the ICU for 3 weeks. They're eventually going to die. Their lungs are not going to recover. They're eventually going to die from a hospital-related infection, a heart attack, being in bed despite being on blood thinners. Like, it's an inevitability, but we keep going.
Are you aware of any studies around obesity? So perhaps we could at least alert people at the highest risk. Like, if you're obese, seriously listen to me, because here's the percentage of those people who die, type of thing. Are you aware of any study like that?
I know they've done studies that have proven that obese patients are they're at a higher risk based on studies than patients with COPD or asthma among people who get COVID. Believe it or not, it's the obese. and that's well documented. And I mean, really, that's something that absolutely that needs to be. But you talk to the real people that are having the biggest time are the clinic docs. They're the ones who are begging their patients to go get vaccinated, and they're just unable to connect with their. And these are patients they've known for years. They've had a strong relationship with, and they're still not able to convince their patients to get vaccinated.
Let me ask you,
it's that bad.
Let me presumptively say that we are now friends. And as my friend, and what you do for a living and how you handle that conversation, like if this, then tell someone else, and you walk out the room. As a friend, would you tell me, Joe, stop trying to convince anybody? It's just not only not going to work, but you're just pissing people off. Stop talking about it. Is that what you would tell me?
I would.
Yeah, I think honestly, Joe, if it's causing you personal distress and anguish, then you got to let it go, man. You got to let it go.
I understand your frustration, Joe, trust me. But what I've learned is listening is often better than speaking in these scenarios when people just feel like you're bashing them. And I'm not going to say I get it, but I understand when you have a nurse come in, a doctor, and we're like, are you vaccinated? No, I didn't get the vaccine. Why not? It's almost comes off like, regardless, even if they were on the edge about it, now they're just feeling like crap. And so we go in there with more of a, okay, well, what are your concerns? But in reality, if they're going to make up their mind, they're going to make up their mind. And so our job is to reach their concerns and listen. And
okay.
I still have a nephew that refuses to get vaccinated because he says, well, I had it before, but he won't get tested to see if he's got the antibodies. So he is not invited to any family's house at this point in time. And he's still not convinced that he should get vaccinated. I find that awful, especially after the problems I went through when I did get COVID. It was.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're actually doing better, because I mean, clearly you had a significant adverse effect from it, and that's
yeah, COVID walking pneumonia with a heart attack. I 6 weeks after I had COVID, I had no clue that something like that would happen. I luckily work in medical devices enough that I knew something was happening, and I got in before I had a lot of damage. Wow. So that's one thing.
You look great right now. So
doesn't she though?
Yeah.
Yes,
regrettably,
I have been gray for a long, long time though, long before COVID.
Regrettably, one of our listeners is a doctor and a friend who's prone to bad puns. He thinks they're funny, so I'm compelled to read. You mean obese patients have a fat chance of coming out of COVID unscathed? How better to end this event? Dr. Lin, could you just, it hurts. It hurts to read out loud. It hurts my audience. But like you said, it's like, some people are just going to do what they're going to do. Ed is going to tell bad puns and just let it go. Just let it go. I'm not going to convince him not to tell puns.
Yeah, I think
did you ask him about my thing? I'm sorry, on the packaging for their product, or they just... I
did. You ran away, and I told them.
I had a meeting.
The punchline was, I know. I told them the punchline was the folks that they're working with discover if they actually have someone on the team that is called a packaging engineer, because that's a thing. And if they don't, they could do worse than spending a half hour with you.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's something that we're told that they have, not specifically the package engineer, so definitely something we'll check.
Yes, there's a lot of us, believe it or not. So if I can't help, I know other people that can help. So
sure.
Gentlemen, and for everyone who listened and contributed today, or just showed up and learned something new, thank you. This is what this whole platform is about. I'm really grateful, and thank you for inviting something. Creating something that's going to help a lot of people. I'm excited for your team. And
thank you. Thank you for the platform. It's honestly a pleasure kind of interacting like this. So thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you. Likewise for me. Have a great week, everyone.
Thanks, Joe. Take care.
bye.